there's any issues. Beth, you want to report? All right, so we'll call the meeting to order at 10:02 on Wednesday, September 14th, 2022. Beth, could you please complete the roll call?
Sure. Davis,
Here.
Dilger,
Here.
Leffler,
Here.
McNulty,
Here.
Rosenthal,
Here.
Together?
Shepherd. I got that.
Here.
Smith.
Here, thank you.
And for
Does anyone-
CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski, Deborah Wishmeyer, and Beth Stoneburner. Sorry about that, Heidi.
No, you're wonderful. Thank you. I'm the one trying to cut you off. Got the goods. Thank you. Does anyone have any additions to the agenda?
Recording in progress.
Hey, here. Do you want to? All right, we got that covered. I don't see any attendees for public comment. Okay, we'll keep moving to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move.
Thank you, Scott.
I'll second.
Thank you, Pam. Any discussion needed? Anything that anybody needs to take off? Or should we go ahead and do our vote? Seeing none, let's do it. Beth, please.
Davis,
Yes.
Dilger,
Yes. Yes.
Leffler,
Yes.
McNulty,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
Shepherd,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Rebecca and Beth and Deborah, I know have divided up some of the reporting here today. I have the information, so I'll try to call on the right person. You tell me if I have the wrong one, please. So we'll start with potential members.
And
Okay.
that one is me. So we've been talking about Warren Newport, and I am happy to report that their board has voted to join CCS. The memo that Ryan provided to that board is available on page 22 in your packet. I've also included in your packet the membership application that they filled out, and then on page 14, that's sort of like my write-up of their geography, the timeline, the project costs, etc. So the process is that executive committee would vote to recommend membership to governing board, and then in October governing board would vote to approve their membership, at which point they would become a CCS member. And then we'd start their project work to move forward with implementation. I am going to say a quick word about Mount Prospect, even though it's technically a separate item. It is possible that they will want to go live with Warren Newport, and I should have more information at the end of the month on that. They're shooting to make a decision with their board about CCS membership in November. So we would, as a board, vote in January to approve their membership. So we would theoretically start some project work with them, maybe some scheduling before they were actually, before their membership were actually approved. But that way they could stay on the Warren Newport schedule as opposed to having to wait a whole additional year to go live. So both Warren Newport and Mount Prospect are pretty sizable libraries compared to Grayslake, for example. So when we did Palatine and Grayslake, Palatine is one of our biggest libraries, whereas Grayslake is sort of more in the middle to small. So there will be more staff to train, although we do have our online resources now. So we would be able to work with both libraries to develop a more hybrid approach to training. I think we saw with Grays Lake and Palatine, we were kind of forced by circumstance to do online training. And we definitely think there are some areas that will benefit from more, standard synchronous training. So it's 100% doable to do both of the libraries at the same time. It'll just look a little bit different, as all of our projects have with our new member ads. So I'm happy to take questions about Warren Newport, the content in the packet, potential timeline, etc.
So I don't have any questions about Warren Newport. I am curious about the North Chicago. You referenced North Chicago joining Prairie Cat. I don't remember, and it might be just that I don't remember discussion about, whether they considered CCS or kind of how that went.
Yeah, so over the years, North Chicago has reached out to CCS a couple of times for financial information, which I'd have to go back and look at my notes at the last time that they approached us. And it gave them like, here's what our smallest members pay, here's what our largest members pay. And most recently, when libraries have been reaching out, when I know that there's, it's not super sustainable for them to pay for membership, I've asked like, what would be reasonable for you? And nobody has replied. So I think for North Chicago, like they've long been interested in consortium membership, and it's for CCS, the annual fees are just a lot more than they would experience with a larger consortium.
Hey, any other questions for Rebecca at this time? Okay, then I would entertain a motion. Help me if I make this one go sideways. That the executive committee will recommend to the governance committee approving membership for the Warren Newport Public Library.
This is Jeannie. I'll make that motion.
This is
Thank you,
Brian,
Jean.
I'll second.
Thanks, Brian. If there's no further discussion, let's vote.
Okay. I'll start with Shepherd, since you did the motion.
I was a second, but I'm a yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Dilger,
Yes.
Leffler,
Yes.
McNulty,
Yes.
and Rosenthal. And I'll make the note that you're right, Brian. You seconded, Jeannie did motioned. I apologize for that.
Okay, any further discussion about potential members? Seeing none, we'll move on to member concerns. I believe this one's Rebecca also.
Yeah, so there have been two issues that have come up during sort of regular tickets, like CCS staff. I think Deborah's working on, well, I'm working on one of these now. I took it over from Deborah, and Miyako's working on the other. But I thought this was a good opportunity to get some feedback from executive committee. So the first is regarding Comprise Smart Pay. And there is a section in your packet that says insert language. Deborah pulled the language and sent it to me, and then I didn't put it in the packet. All the CCS members are using Comprise for their gateway for e-commerce payments. And then there is a processing component. Everybody, maybe one library is not, but essentially everybody's using Thesis for their processing, for their merchant account and their processing. And what we've heard from one library is that their processing fees are eating up essentially their whole deposits, and sometimes are greater than their deposits for Smart Pay. And so one, I'm interested if other libraries are seeing that. I did see Diane nodding, so I'm thinking that perhaps she is seeing that as well. Two, do we? So they're not asking, can they use a different service? They're asking, can they just like not promote this service and take the links away? And just, they have, another option, that they wouldn't link to on the pack. So, sorry, Deborah, I'm just like sharing your email, but as always, super professional, nothing question. So, the language in the packet is just approved to work with Comprise for the e-commerce through the pack. And that we wanted to have a standard practice for all members. So that's the first issue in a nutshell. So it sounds like Diane is seeing some payment problems.
Well, here's the problem. We use that for all the CCS stuff. And then we use Braintree for our program stuff. Braintree is payment by transaction only. With TSYS, the rates go up and down, and we don't use that for programs. But because it's required by CCS, that we're using Comprise and therefore TSYS, we're considering not allowing payments from home, only from in the building. And that's because we get so few, we have to have a separate account for that. And there's not only a transaction fee, but there's always also a monthly fee. And if the monthly fee is $40 a month and we're getting one transaction online, then we're losing basically $40 a month. It's getting worse. And so we're looking at what can we do? And so that was the first issue. Having the other account for in-house, we would probably leave that because we do get a lot of people that pay through our self-check, but it's gotten worse, and we've really noticed it in the last year. So I don't know if there's any way to renegotiate the costs. Yeah, it's really bad. We're losing a lot every month.
Yeah, I think definitely the move to fine free changes the priorities for CCS, that 27 of 28 of our members aren't charging regular overdue fees, I think is a pretty significant difference from 5 years ago when we made that decision to, move forward with e-commerce for everybody and the same vendor in the pack. I mean, I'm happy to put this on the agenda for governing board and see if they want to say that we can rescind that requirement. I guess the question is, does CCS as an organization have a vested interest in requiring members to offer some sort of remote payment?
Who negotiated the deal 5 years ago?
Who negotiated it? Well, so the TSYS pricing is just through TSYS. So you each have your own contract with TSYS. We have like CCS pricing that they've provided us, but I'm trying to work with TSYS now to understand it, because they said that the prices haven't changed, but also what we're hearing is the prices have changed. So I don't know if that's just a volume issue, and so like the average transaction cost is higher, or if there's actually a difference on the invoices. So I had asked Liz at Huntley to send her invoice, and it was not itemized in a way that I could look at and compare to the pricing that I have. So so I don't know, but yeah, I did essentially, I guess.
So Rebecca,
The advantage is for us all to have the same platform though, like with Polaris, so that the customer experience is the same. Is that behind us all having the same uniformity in who we use?
Yes, that was the initial thinking, and I think that still holds true. The question is, what is the volume of payments the same as we're seeing 5 years ago, that it matters as much? We're also, 5 years ago, we hadn't said wherever the payment hits, the payment stays. So, if, Diane says we're not going to offer payments at home and somebody wants to pay at home and they can't pay at Cary, so they pay at Crystal Lake is going to keep the money for that, which, maybe is still better for Cary because they're not paying a $40 monthly fee. I guess CCS could offer a centralized, like CCS could pay for one account for everyone and the money could just go into a CCS pot that is used for something, just like applied against member fees for everybody equally. So we have other options that we can explore.
Renegotiating with TSYS would be at the top of the list though, right?
Yes, and so I have reached out to them and they're like, oh yeah, I don't know. They said that the prices are the same, but I don't understand them. So we're still working on that. Yes.
Okay, so fact finding and negotiation is still in process. Any other report or next steps on this?
In the interim, like if Huntley wants to take the link off their pack, like, is that okay? Like the language in the governing board decision says that they have to offer Comprise for e-commerce through the pack, or that CCS is going to work with Comprise for e-commerce through the pack. But it doesn't say you have to display the link, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to cost libraries money unnecessarily as we kind of work for another solution.
So is the question, is that a reasonable stopgap to allow them to take the link off? It sounds reasonable to me. What are the thoughts of the committee?
I guess I would say that, Diane hadn't necessarily reached out. So if we allow Huntley to do this, which I'm all for, are we going to advertise to the rest of the members that they can do the same?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely include a report in the governing board packet, and we can send an email to LibAdmin as well saying that this is a change that we've made, and that could also help with some fact finding. Maybe someone's already negotiated a better deal with TSYS or something.
I think that sounds really reasonable, and I would just add to say that it's a stopgap measure while we work on what the long-term solution is. Okay, other thoughts on this topic? Questions?
I would maybe encourage all libraries to send a copy of a recent TSYS statement to CCS or to this committee, because I am scratching my head over the $40 a month fee. I mean, it's been a little while since I looked at it. I don't recall ever paying a $40 a month TSYS fee. I do recall getting charged for PCI non-compliance when we were in compliance, and TSYS backed that fee back off. But so now I'm wondering, is there any standardization among the libraries on what TSYS is billing? We don't know, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, I have like a copy of an agreement that theoretically all the libraries had access to, but yeah, so I will absolutely request that. I'll email LibAdmin this afternoon and note what's going on and ask for that information.
Super.
Thanks,
That way
Lauren.
we can at least get some standards, see if there's any standardization at all.
Perfect.
Sounds like a good plan. Unless there's any objection, let's move on to the refugee cards.
Yeah, so Mieko is working on this, and I believe it is with Ela, Lauren. Yes. So Ela's been getting an uptick in requests for cards for refugees. So they have refugee ID. So they have identification, but it doesn't include proof of address. They're generally staying with a host family. And so the CERC manager at Ela reached out to ask, like, are other libraries experiencing this? Are there any best practices? So Mieko's working with her on that. One, I'm curious if others are experiencing the same thing. And two, wondering if it is sort of like piecemeal that libraries don't have a solid procedure. If CCS were to move forward with like a centralized like we could create a template and issue like a CCS RB card, like we do for like a CPL patron, that refugees, that could be used by any library to give to a refugee. The issue with that would be that they would not have access to online resources, where if ELA issues them a card, then ELA has, like, they can use the ELA online resources. So Lauren, did I accurately summarize what you guys are experiencing?
Can I ask, are you promoting this service or this, the ability to get these cards, or are people just coming in and asking for them?
No, there's just been an uptick in honestly a lot of Ukrainian refugees, according to what staff have been saying. I don't if there's a lot of family in the area that folks are settling around in the ELA area.
I asked our CERCAT, and we have not been approached by anyone, but we also hadn't been, saying, promoting that they are available. So we'll look into that too.
I think
do you have quantities like 10, 20?
I think it's tied in because we do ESL, and our ESL is primarily Russian and Ukrainian in that class. But I think that's what's why it would be more of a more local demand.
Was anyone else been experiencing this uptick, or hearing from another library that they're experiencing an uptick? We haven't seen it at Highland Park.
I checked with my CERC staff yesterday as well, and we haven't been seeing it there here at Morton Grove.
I like the idea of having something in place for when we do get the question. So the idea of a centralized template, but not being able to access the e-resources is a real difficulty.
And Miko's, I think, reaching out to other libraries as well. To me, the situation is, different, obviously, but kind of practically similar to like a nanny card or an au pair card or something. Like if they're staying with a host family, exchange student, do any of your libraries have specific procedures around those? Like what, like the family has to say, oh, they're staying with me for 6 months or 3 months or something like that?
We have a temporary card that we use in those situations. And so when I was talking to my CERC manager yesterday, we determined that while, if there was this type of template, we would use it in the event that this happens, but that for us, we would issue them a temporary card because we have procedures in place for that would accommodate this situation.
So until they found permanent housing to have proof of residency.
Yep.
Lauren, does that give you some info to take back? And Deborah, do you feel like that's some good info for Mieko for the CERC group? And we can discuss internally if we want to do like a template or best practice.
I feel like the temporary card is a great solution. I don't honestly know if we have a temporary card, but I'm just thinking about, okay, a family goes through a divorce and, someone's sister moves in with them, during this transitional time. It'd be the exact same situation, whether, it wouldn't, I would hate to create a refugee card, right? Temporary card seems like exactly what we're looking for. So it might just be that we don't have that at ELA and we need to add it. That really seems perfect.
Yeah, we did that a number of years ago because we were seeing a lot of situations where nannies needed card or like the grandparent was coming to stay for the summer, that sort of thing. So that fills a niche for us that this would also fall under as far as, we're concerned. Yeah.
The only thing we, for our nanny cards, we do request that someone from the family that they're staying with does come in and sign so that there's responsibility. So, but it is a temporary.
Years ago, I was at a library. We were near an extended stay hotel. So we had a few business people who were in town for like 3 months, 6 months. And we came up with a temporary card for them too. So if you have business reference librarians out there, it can be a service they can promote.
Cool, thank you. Unless there is anything else from anyone on this, we'll move on to the innovative updates with Deborah, please.
Yes, so at our last meeting, we shared that Innovative was testing e-content integration in Vega Discover. So unfortunately, I have to share that in the past month, they have not made any additional progress on e-content integration. Unfortunately, they are still troubleshooting issues with Hoopla integration, so we haven't been able to move forward with that testing. We're currently waiting for their development team to either resolve the Hoopla issues and or move on to testing a different vendor while the team works through those Hoopla integration issues. So in speaking with the development team and our Vega Discover rep, they still feel like they're on track to finish e-content integration by the end of the calendar year. But I think this potentially changes our internal timeline. We're supposed to present to governing board a CCS recommendation in October. But at this point, and Rebecca, you can chime in here as well. We don't quite think the product will be in a place for us to recommend adoption of the software in October. So I think, we're really waiting on their development team to indicate next steps and where they are in the process.
Yeah, I think my current plan is that we still present, like, here's where Vega's at to governing board in October with some comparative information about other discovery platforms that are out there. So the intention is to present it in October, do some additional testing, like encourage your staff to look at stuff, and then have a vote in January as whether we want to move forward with a soft launch and ultimately like sign the contract with Vega. Given the current state of the product and the planned timeline with Warren Newport, I don't feel that we're going to be in a position to, I agree with Deborah, we're not going to be able to recommend in October that we vote to accept it in January. I think it's very disappointing. I think it's a really great product in a lot of really, really good ways, and it's going to be really beneficial to users. I would add, and I would stress this at October and January governing board as well. This does not mean that we're saying we're never going to use Vega. It's saying that, we can't plan to adopt it under the terms of the partner agreement, which is that we adopt it like within 6 months of general availability for consortia or something like that. So, the next steps would be A, do nothing, and we could just continue using PowerPack, which we've been reasonably happy with, or B, after the Warren Newport project and potentially Mount Prospect project, we could move into either an informal like RFP process to just like see what's out, like an RFI essentially, see what's out there and see if it's worth doing an RFP. Or we could put it on the calendar for like 3 years from now, we want to look or something. So I do think that should we move forward with an RFP in the future, Innovative and Vega would certainly submit a bid and I think be competitive. But that would give everyone an opportunity to kind of see the rest of the rodeo.
Okay, thank you for the update. Any questions?
Can we get an update on how the BiblioCommons integration is going with, was it Glenview? I can't remember who's adopting that. And does that have any of the capabilities that Vega has not yet been able to deliver?
Yes. And Deborah can maybe talk a little bit more about e-content in BiblioCommons is a question mark for me.
It seems Glenview has said that BiblioCommons has been able to develop an e-content solution that works for them. Whether it would work for a full consortia all using BiblioCommons, that is unclear to me as well.
So for me, The big concern I have with BiblioCommons, which is not to rule it out, I also think BiblioCommons is a great product. At least the way that they are configuring it with Glenview and the way they have it configured with like a similar consortium in Michigan is that like the Glenview catalog is a separate URL and a separate catalog. And then like the CCS catalog is a separate URL and a separate catalog. So a patron does a search, a Glenview patron's like, I want this book. And they do a search and are like, oh, Glenview doesn't have it. There's like this little bitty link that they have to click that's like essentially go search the CCS libraries that they click, and then a new window opens and then it does a follow-on search. So I think that is not an optimal user experience. And it's not in line with the way that our patrons in our user testing show that they use the pack. Some of our first round of user testing, we saw that something like 80% of the users, and I am making up that number, it was a significant majority, but I'm not sure what the percentage is. If the search filter was set to like search Glenview materials, they immediately changed it to search all member libraries and then did their search. So it is the CCS recommendation that we had issued after that testing that you default to search all member libraries. Some members have followed that recommendation and some have not, but I would be very cautious about moving to a platform that would like essentially require members search in a way that is not their preferred method. So that is my big concern with BiblioCommons. It's not to say that there's not another option that we're not aware of at this time, but I think that would be a big watch out for me during any RFI or RFP.
Yeah, that's a step backwards. That's like the LinkedIn product requiring a whole
Yes.
second search. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for the update. Any other questions?
I'm sorry. So, and maybe you said this, Rebecca, but are you going to be formally recommending that we not adopt and then basically step back from continuing forward with development in October, or how do you see that?
I think I'll need to talk with Innovative to get a better sense of our options. Like our partner development agreement technically expired in June, so we're not governed by any agreement now. We have not signed, like that development partner agreement said that like we would make a good faith effort to go live within 6 months of general availability. So it's not in general availability for consortia yet. So, I mean, we could just like roll with it until it is in general availability. And then if we don't feel at that time that we can adopt, then like drop out of the program. But I do think it's important for us to have a discussion in October and a vote in January prior to Warren Newport to say like, to get out of the will we, won't we. So it could be the vote in January just says we will not go live before, December of 2023, and that we can reevaluate in the interim. So I'm not entirely sure yet is the short answer, but I think that we need to specifically say we're not going to adopt it like 2 months after Warren Newport goes live. If that is what we, if nothing magical happens between now and October.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking that at some point we almost have to just make a definitive statement one way or the other. And if it's not going to work, then it's like it seems like as a consortium, there's other priorities that are coming down the road, or in terms of other things happening. And so it's like, okay, we can't keep on this kind of on the fence of will we or won't we, and it's time to probably just.
I mean, there are some benefits, I think, to continuing with the program, primarily providing, I think the feedback we've provided has been really instrumental in creating a product that will work for CCS eventually. It's really a question of like the timing. I mean, eventually it's going to be in general availability, and I think the partner program will just like go away for this product. Okay. But I take your point, and I will talk more with Deborah, whose staff time it is that's being spent on these extra meetings, and consider that for the October discussion and then go from there.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to again emphasize, I don't see the fact that this isn't ready to go. This is not a reflection on the staff and the work that's been done on the part of CCS to get to this point. So I'm not, I really see this on the development side. It's not on the, it's not for lack of effort on CCS's staff side to make this work. So I just want to make sure that I just say that. So, because Deborah, I do very much appreciate all the work that you're putting into this.
Don't worry, we know it's not on our side too.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Deborah. All right, unless there are any other questions, we'll move on to the benefits update with Beth.
Yes, this one's
Oh,
me.
I'm sorry,
that's it.
Rebecca. Don't give me a list. I'm going to mess it up. Sorry.
Fine. It's fine. So I think many of you are WIN members, so you are aware that WIN is adding a high deductible health plan and HSA option for members. So Scott did send me a very interesting email that I still have to research. Thank you for that, Scott. That they at Fremont, they offer a high deductible plan with an HRA instead of an HSA. So that is fascinating.
We have both. We have both plans.
Okay.
And the HRA is something you can set up on your own to go along with a high deductible regular PPO plan that reimburses staff for any dollar amount you set for deductibles. It's a way to kind of wean them off of paying a $500 deductible, and now it's $1,500. If they go over the 500, we cover that 1,000. It's only if they go over it. Most people don't go over it. So it was a big savings, and it migrated everybody over without complaint.
I'm very interested in that because I do think that there are some good benefits for staff with the other plans, some good potential savings, but I also am concerned about asking them to like have on hand, this extra cash for a potentially much higher deductible. So we need to determine by the end of this month if we will offer all three plans or some combination of plans A, B, and C. My recommendation is that for this coming benefit year, we offer all three plans and contribute to the HSA. And I think that we could then do some additional research into the HRA for the next benefit year, since we are creeping right up. So I have in your packet the current participation in health plans, just so you can kind of see that reference. We certainly would see some savings if we, pushed everybody to the new plan C. I always divide things among the libraries. When I'm like, it's $10,000. But in the grand scheme, $10,000 per year is not a huge amount when we're talking about employee retention and satisfaction. So my recommendation is to add the plan C now, keep plan A and plan B, and then I think we can look at for next year options to kind of nudge folks with some financial incentives to plan C the next benefit year.
So it
Thank
looks
you,
like everybody's on plan A right now. I mean, that's what the numbers. And just when I was looking at the WIN stuff, I thought that they were saying that the idea was plan A and then B or C, not B and C. It doesn't really matter because we don't have anybody on B right now. But when we were looking at it, it was like plan A and then B or C. It wasn't offering all three of the plans, but that was just the way that we were looking at it. Maybe it's because we have a lot more employees that are kind of spread out over the plans right now, that it kind of didn't make as much financial sense for us to offer all three of them.
So if I can.
Oh, yeah. Hit me with it, Lauren.
Yeah, I in addition to being the treasurer of CCS, I'm the treasurer of WIN. So I was the one that made the recommendation to add Plan C for Win. And when we ran the numbers, I mean, obviously it's different for every library based on the percentage that the employer puts towards the contributions, but in pretty much any iteration, it's going to be a savings for employee to switch from A to C. So I get what you're saying, Brian, because it's hard. At ELA, we looked at the numbers based on our contributions. It's harder to incentivize a switch from Plan B to C. But with CCS having all their employees on A, then C is definitely a great alternative option. So that's exactly what Win had in mind in adding the Plan C option, was for folks that are on A, but it's a good alternative with the employer making these like CCS is saying 1,000 for individual and 2,000 HSA contributions for family coverage. So
yeah, and I agree with,
just to give you that
and that's what I
background.
was like. I think it looks like it works well in this case because everybody's on A, and I was just saying, if you had a mix of A and B already, I think that would be a harder case. And then I'm not sure why I guess why you want to keep B if nobody's on B right now. Like, why wouldn't we just do A and C? That's
Yeah, when I looked at the numbers for us, like Plan B was actually more expensive for CCS than Plan C because of just like how we contribute
Right.
and how it shook out. So, I mean, like, I'm fine with offering plans A and C and not B. We had a couple of employees on B over the past years, but they have switched to A. Deborah, you were on B for a minute, right? Yeah. So, I mean, at this point with no one on it, I'm fine with offering just Plan A and Plan C. My thought with just offering all three is that it doesn't like cost CCS anything to have them
Right.
on the benefit sheet. But
And it's probably easier because all the stuff that comes from Win includes A and
Yeah.
B on it. So that would just require more form customization, but yeah.
yeah, so I mean, like, again, I have no strong preference about Plan B. I don't think it's a super strong option for CCS. I think you could make the case that, for a staff member, it's a good sort of middle ground, but again, our staff members who had been on it have switched to A in the past 2 or 3 years. So
yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I just thought that was just interesting. I wanted to have that discussion.
So we could offer all three, Lauren, if we wanted to, but there's
Yeah.
really no benefit to offering B at this time, except for paperwork stuff.
To Brian's point, the nice thing about dropping B as an offering is it's just less to have to explain to people. But you have a stable staff, right? There's not a lot of
We do.
turnover. So it's not like
Yep.
every year you've got half your staff you need to explain all the different plans to. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a consideration.
So given the conversation, Rebecca, would you still recommend plans A, B, and C?
I think I would, just so we can say like, we're adding, not taking away. And then, as we look at the HRA and maybe add that as an option, say like, okay, we're going to add this HRA and take away Plan B. And like, look at how Plan C is better than Plan A. So yes, my recommendation would stay the same for this year. And I imagine we'd revisit this topic next year.
I'll just add, I'm in the Limerick Consortia, and we went self-funded a couple of years ago, kind of ahead of the curve on Win by a couple of years. But you guys are pretty much going to be running the same programs, it looks like, that Limerick's been offering. We migrated people away because everybody was on the low deductible plan because the percentage the employee paid was nothing and very few people had family coverage. So they all liked that plan. It's $500 deductible. We moved everybody over, just didn't offer that plan anymore, and went to a $1,500 deductible with much lower premiums. But by covering with that HRA, they kept their same low deductible and got lower premiums. The library paid lower premiums, and we only incurred the expense for those that go over the $500 deductible. But the reason it worked over the HSA, even though the HSA is now caught on in popularity, people still like the idea that they can just do a copay. That they can just go for a regular visit and just plop 20 bucks down and be done with it. And that PPO plan allows for that. The HSA is a little scary because you pay everything until you pay nothing. And that kind of freaks people out. And until you have the opportunity to build up savings in the HSA, so the employer gives you money, we give it out on a quarterly basis. So we don't give you a lump sum at the beginning of the year and then you leave 2 days later and keep all the money, which is what boards worry about. So every quarter you get a 25% of whatever your annual contribution from the library is. But if you get bills in January and you have to hit your family $5,600 deductible, it's a tough to start an HSA, but once you get them in, it's a good plan. But the HRA, I recommend it's not hard to implement and it can provide immediate benefit to staff and soften the landing if you're going to take a plan away.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are we going to, is it going to be funded all at the beginning, or is it going to be like, as Scott said, kind of like quarterly?
As Lauren said, we have a pretty stable staff and also like we have a small staff. So I would just fund it at the beginning of the year. I think the potential for loss for CCS is pretty low, given the number of staff. I'm open to doing it quarterly. I'm just trying to save Beth a couple of clicks.
I think your point about the stable staff is well taken. The other thing with the, as someone who, broke her arm on January 2nd, if you're going to have a lot of medical expenses very early in the calendar year, and then you're out of pocket, right? It's better to just have that 2,000, that 1,000 for an individual or 2,000 for a family. I think having that up front makes a lot of sense. The only time I would do the I hear you about the quarterly, I would do that if we had a lot of employee turnover and, for sure, but yeah.
Yeah, we give 3,000 family, so it's an extra chunk of money too. So $700 a quarter. But yeah, no, it's for those. Each year we've had more people migrate over into the HSA now, especially good for young employees because they don't incur expenses and they get to pocket that money. They can build up their HSA over time, and that's 3 tax savings and all that stuff. So.
The only thing this is my wish list. If the advantages of the HSA, for older folks like me, you put that money in, save that money for use in retirement. If you say you're going to use that HSA money after you're 65, then what you really want is to invest those HSA funds, right? So it sure would be nice if Mission Square had HSA. I would be in my perfect world, then that's where the library would be making those contributions, and then people could use that HSA as investment options. Right now, if it's tied to your bank, I think most people are likely just going to either use it for immediate spending or leave it in their basically 0% accounts. So
Yeah,
that's neither here nor there with CCS. That's just a HSA contemplation. So
yeah, that's 12 cents a month adds up, Lauren. So
Thank you so much. So Rebecca included on the agenda that this is a decision. We need to take action. So jump in if I'm missing the boat here, Rebecca. The executive committee could adopt the recommendation from the executive director to continue to offer plans A and B and add plan C. Do we need any further detail for the motion?
I would make that motion.
Sorry, further detail, can we say that CCS will contribute $1,000 to the HSA for employee only subscribers and $2,000 to the HSA for spouse, child, family subscribers?
Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you.
Lauren, still making the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. If there's not any further discussion, we'll have Beth take the vote.
I'll start with Rosenthal,
Yes.
Shepherd,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Dilger,
Yes.
Leffler,
Yes.
and McNulty.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. So now we have fun from Beth. Sorry, Beth, I was going to make you talk about benefits, but now we can make you talk about the employee handbook updates.
That's okay. I made Rebecca talk about the Plan C. She has a little bit of a better understanding of it than I do. Employee handbook updates. There are 3 changes that we included the revised language in the packet, either highlighted in red or strike through. So just briefly, we updated the language to the bereavement leave policy regarding miscarriage, failed adoptions, a failed surrogacy agreement, etc., as listed in the packet, as well as we increased the number of days, the annual number of days from 5 to 10 paid leave annually. So really, this was just based on the recommendation from HR Source about the updated language for, like I said, for miscarriages, failed adoption, et cetera, and the number of days paid annually. So I would just ask if there's any questions on that change or recommended changes to what we've presented.
Okay.
I
That's
think
all
we're all
get.
familiar with these, right? We're all making
Mhm.
these same changes to our handbooks
Mhm.
right now. Looks good.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. The second change is around the addition of, to incorporate the Crown Act, the Create a Respectful and Open Workplace for Natural Hair Act that goes into effect January 2023. So we have updated language in a couple of different areas of our existing handbook, including the equal employment opportunity section, the non-discrimination and anti-harassment section. We did not specifically add it to the dress code. We made some additional changes to the dress code, but again, we made these changes based on recommended language provided to us by HR Source. So,
Okay.
and I'm assuming no questions on that. That's probably something everyone is updating as well. If they haven't already, they will by January. And then for the dress code change, we simply just removed references to specific items of clothing. We felt this was a little outdated and just kind of removed that section. So the potential action is just to approve the updated policies as presented, unless there's any concerns.
Oh, not hearing any. Oh, did someone have one? Did I miss something? Okay, well then we'd entertain a motion as Beth just stated.
So moved.
I moved second.
Thank
I have
you.
Diane and Lauren.
Thank you, Beth. Unless there are any other questions or comments, let's go ahead and vote.
I'll start with McNulty,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
Shepherd,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Dilger,
Yes.
and Leffler.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much. Next on the agenda, we have the office move, which I have down as also being Beth.
It's also me. So, as when we discussed the office project update last month, it seemed like the recommendation was to maybe provide a bit more of a summary of what we'd done to date, since there were new members on the executive committee. So that was what we included in the packet, just an overall summary. We began this project probably actually more than 2 years ago, as soon as we realized that we'd hit like 3-year mark from when this lease was going to expire. But we did an RFP for brokers and landed on Cushman and Wakefield and Jonathan Metzel, who I've worked with in the past. Actually, Deborah first met with Jonathan and I while Rebecca was out on leave, but then once Rebecca was back, and as we got a little closer to the expiration date, we've really begun working more closely with him to understand our potential costs. We did mapping to really determine where the sweet spot is for where the office should be located centrally for both from the libraries, but as well as mapping for employees, current employees, just to see. But our focus has been trying to find that central location for the libraries. And then as well as identifying the office space needs and what the appropriate square footage would be, because we recognize we have way more than we need right now, but really understanding what is an appropriate amount of space for us has been a challenge. But certainly I'd say we've put a lot of effort into that, especially as just how we use the office has changed. So we reviewed a number of buildings with Jonathan. We toured 6 buildings in June. We narrowed that down to 3, and those 3 buildings, just for preliminary consideration, not that it has to be these 3, but we did request RFPs and architect plans from those 3 buildings, which we've received. And all in all, we'd say that those 3 buildings have similar amenities. Every building is going to be better than where we are right now, but like many more amenities for employees, as well as meeting space options for CCS staff and the libraries, which we felt was important. So as of now, where we're at is we have follow-up tours scheduled for September 23rd with Tri-State Office Center, which right at the moment we'd say is our front runner, and possibly with Arbor Lake. We're just waiting to see if they submit a revised space plan. Both Marcin Urbanski and Rachel Fisher are scheduled to go with us for these tours so we can get additional feedback from the other CCS departments. And then as of now, our plan would still be to make a proposal to executive committee in November, and hopefully a recommendation will be made to governing board in January, which would fall in line with the timeline of the lease expiration. And as of now, we would still plan to move in June, which is 2 months before the lease expires, but would help to avoid any potential conflicts with the Warren Newport / possible Mount Prospect go live.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions?
I actually have a question that I'll research unless anyone has a strong opinion on it right now. It just came to me. Does the lease need to go to governing board with our revised responsibilities? Executive committee is responsible for contracts. But it's also like a long-term contract. It's a higher dollar value. So I'll look at our policies and stuff, but it's something to consider if you feel that it would be important for like member buy-in to go to governing board, or if you think it would just be more efficient and effective to have a small group like carefully reading things. So food for thought.
Thank you. We will.
I was going to say, I'll chime in here. If it's not clearly stated, I think it would be best to bring it to governing board.
It's a big one. That sounds prudent.
It's a big one.
To cede
Yeah.
authority, but yeah, I don't like to cede authority, but if the lease would extend the terms of office of all of us on the committee, then bigger buy-in is probably a good idea.
And it would still be like recommendation from the executive committee to do this. So the governing
Right.
board wouldn't feel that, yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Great. And just a little note, so we're, OMA friendly. We had a little chat conversation that Brian stepped away for a moment. I acknowledge it. He's back. Welcome back, Brian. All right. If there aren't any other questions about the office move, okay, we'll move on to the October governing board meeting. After communicating with Rebecca and considering her recommendation, and based on our previous practices and procedures, made the determination to have the October governing meeting be a remote meeting. Any questions, comments? Okay, then we'll move on to reports. President report. I do not have a report today. Secretary.
No report, but I will not be attending the October meeting. I'll be on vacation and I'll have someone else stepping in for me.
Good for you, Diane. Great.
So in that case, do we need a secretary pro tem for that day?
I'll defer to Rebecca. What would you advise?
Yes, yeah, I would not like to put that on your alternate. Oh, Scott, are you volunteering? Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
double check. I also thought there might be language that it needs to be the treasurer, but, or maybe it's just treasurer or someone who's assigned. I'll double check
I'll double
that.
check on that. But Diane, you are relieved of responsibility for October. Thank you for the heads up.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And our treasurer's report.
I have no report.
Thank you. Okay, and back to Deborah for committees and groups.
I'm happy to take any questions on either the ILL or CAM meeting that were held in August. I will take a moment to plug an upcoming Q&A CCS is hosting with Rails delivery staff. That will be next week on Thursday. At the ILL meeting last month, staff did share some concerns about delivery issues, including long in transit times and misrouted items. So if you would like to have the Era of Rails delivery staff, your chances next Thursday. I don't know the time. I think it's in the morning at 10 a.m. Let me just double check on that. But yes, that has been shared with ILL staff, and we've sent some of those concerns ahead of time to Rails staff to address during the meeting.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions for Deborah about committees and groups report? All
Correct.
right.
2 p.m. is next Thursday with Rails.
Thank you, Deborah. And we'll go back to Rebecca for the executive director's report. Unless Rebecca, you want me to try to make Beth do it.
I don't want, I mean, I like Beth and I want her to keep working here. So I just want to add at Beth's recommendation that we have been talking with Paul, our auditor, about adding electronic signatures, and he is such a stickler. Love Paul. He sent back some recommendations that are like a lot of if then else situations. So we are looking into those, and he'll actually be in the office this afternoon to continue work on the audit. So we'll have some follow-up questions for him there. And then our next steps would be to talk with Lauren, our illustrious treasurer, and Lotta Rock and Eamon, our accountants. And I would also like to thank Heidi and Lauren for both being in the office today while I am. Oh, that's a good point. Deborah just hit me with a reminder that I forgot a thing. So thank you for being at the office while I have a sore throat that is almost certainly not a big deal. But the thing that Deborah just reminded me, thank you, Deborah, we do have a question from Glenview about BiblioCommons. And I apologize that I forgot about this for the packet. And as I said, Deborah, can you pull that up by chance while I'm chatting? Thank you. So as I had mentioned earlier, BiblioCommons has like the Glenview pack and then like a separate link that you have to click to get to the CCS pack, which brings up the question like, what should that CCS pack say and what should it look like? Because like, can we allow them to use CCS branding? Should it say Partner Libraries of Glenview? Deborah is going to pull that up so you can take a look at what that will actually look like. So Glenview asked Deborah and me can they use CCS branding? I said, probably that makes the most sense, but I wanted to check with the executive committee since to my knowledge, we don't have any other members that are like applying CCS branding to various products. So Deborah, you want to give a quick demo?
Sure. So this is the test BiblioCommons interface for the Glenview Public Library. So when a patron does a search in the Glenview interface, they are only searching items held by Glenview. give me just a moment while it initiates this search. So once a patron initiates a search in the Glenview interface, there is this small link here that says search other resources. If a patron were to select that option, they could then choose to search all CCS libraries. Once they click that link, BiblioCommons would redirect the patron to a system-wide CCS BiblioCommons interface, and hopefully my sharing is allowing you to see that second tab that just opened. And the question from Glenview is, should this CCS interface be branded with a CCS logo, etc., or should it maintain Glenview specific branding?
So from the CCS point of view, we think for the user that it needs to have some indication that it's searching all CCS libraries, which would include the use of a CCS logo. And I think we can work with Glenview to figure out how to do that most appropriately. Some concerns I have do include sort of like basic SEO stuff, like ccslib.bibliocommons.com is then a URL that's out in the world. So if someone Googles CCS libraries, like that interface will come up. That said, patrons don't really search CCS libraries. They're searching for specific libraries and then getting to CCS. But if there are no concerns from executive committee, I think we can work with Glenview on a solution that will indicate this is like Glenview's catalog searching CCS member libraries, maybe like a duo logo situation. I don't know, but yeah. So anyway, Scott, that is what my issue with BiblioCommons is. Does anyone have concerns about allowing them to use the logo in some form?
I don't have any concerns about the logo. You're using it. I find it hard to believe CCS means anything to anyone other than, us, right? I mean, if I saw that logo at the top of the search screen, I wouldn't find it I would find it even more confusing than leaving Glenview's logo up there. I mean, because at least you're still a Glenview patron, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking like a duo logo situation, like the Glenview logo, and then maybe like CCS smaller under it, like searching CCS partner libraries or searching all CCS members or something. Because I think it needs to be visually different, or it's like, why did it just open in a new tab? Why couldn't I just see these results before? I agree that our patrons don't recognize CCS as a brand. But yeah, it's not my favorite user experience in general. And I'm trying to not make it my responsibility to fix it.
I do like the wording of CCS partner libraries, because it shows that they're affiliated with that group, which even if people don't know what CCS is, they can kind of guess from that.
But when you
I'm
do
in favor of the dual logo.
when you do a regular search in your catalog and it defaults to searching all libraries, CCS's name doesn't come up anywhere. Why should it come up now?
I mean, so you can get to like the whole, like the general CCS pack. It's in the URL when you're searching in PowerPack. It's ccs.polarislibraries.org. I don't know. So CCS does crop up. It's like in the privacy policy at the bottom. Again, I think most patrons aren't looking for that. But I do think it's visible for those who are nosing around.
Well, and let's say someone clicks on it and they want to get back to, just Glenview, and having a visual, differential in that way might help them navigate what it does sound like a less than ideal user experience. So if this is just meant to be a sort of a wayfinder aid, to help people like, this is different. And then when you go back, you can be like, okay, I'm back. Is that the intention? So if it was all seamless and didn't have that concern, we probably wouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah, like the language in Power Pack, when you're changing between like the Glenview catalog and everybody in that filter, it's all member libraries, which raises the question, members of what? But
Okay.
And actually, and I'm thinking back to Brian's point, this is a Glenview situation. This isn't something that CCS needs to spend. And you know what, I'm sorry I said anything. Whatever happens is fine with me. Fine.
I have no problem with them using the CCS logo or language somewhere, but I think, as you said, Rebecca, and as Lauren said, it's not really our problem. So
yeah, I appreciate that they asked, because I mean, we don't really have logo guidelines, but a lot of organizations do. So, it could create some complications for CCS, but I think the opportunity for those complications to arise is pretty limited, based on, again, how our library patrons use all of your catalogs and your data. So I'm not super worried about it. But as long as there's no objections to using CCS as a wayfinding tool, we'll work with them. We'll give them permission and a recommendation and let them do with it what they will.
Are they only using CCS? Or are they allowing to other sources?
As far as I know, it's just CCS. Like, are you like a OCLC follow-on or something?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and because I have ours open right now, and if they could say, in their little drop down, all member libraries, something like that, then it would be similar to what we have. Because the only identification besides our library is at the very bottom of the search. It says Polaris.
Well, I think making that available to them for addressing their issues sounds perfectly reasonable.
Perfect.
seems
Thank
like
you,
that's
Deborah, for the reminder.
Yeah. All right, Deborah, anything else for your report?
Nothing else for me.
Okay, and Rebecca?
No, thank you again to Lauren and Heidi for signing checks. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, there isn't any other business to conduct. There are no objections. I'll adjourn the meeting at 11:15. Sounds good. All right, thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
Feel better, Rebecca.
Bye, everyone.
Feel better.